Welcome to episode 12 of The Golden Shadow, the podcast about psychology, philosophy, myth, mysticism, and mystery. My name is Arran Rogerson.
And I'm Alyssa Polizzi.
Today, we are talking about music. That was good at the same time.
Thanks.
That was like we were harmonizing almost.
We didn't plan it.
We did not plan it. We rehearsed this podcast very little.
Yeah.
So we're coming at music from a philosophical, obviously, and psychological perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to explore what music is, what the nature of music is, how we relate to music, what it means to feel things when you hear music. And we're also coming from a pop and rock perspective.
Yeah.
Alyssa and I both grew up on pop music and rock music, which is very common. We're not classically trained musicians. We're definitely not coming from a place where we listened to other types of music growing up, other than really what was on the radio, you might say.
Yeah, the things our parents listened to growing up and sort of passed on to us as well. Mm-hmm. But we are musicians.
But we are musicians as well. So we are music listeners, music lovers, but we are also musicians.
Music makers.
Music makers. Alyssa and I have collaborated on music before. We've recorded music together. Our social scene has been very musical.
Yeah.
We know a lot of musicians. No one's professional, obviously. It's kind of more of a hobby thing, but it's been a powerful part of our lives. So we'll start by trying to figure out what music kind of is from a technical perspective, sort of more of a, you might even say scientific perspective, try to get at like, what is music really, like what's happening?
Yeah. Let's get meta, Arran.
Let's get meta. We'll start meta, and then we'll kind of ground back down to earth.
We'll bring it down
from there. So everyone is familiar with music. Everyone's heard music. There shouldn't be any question of what music is in a very surface level way. Of course, it's like, oh, it's that, it sounds, and it sounds great, and it's things that make you want to dance, things that like make you feel things, and it's in the background of movies to evoke emotions. But music is very mathematical. It's very cyclical. There's a lot of patterns that are repeating, and those are nested within greater patterns that are nested within even greater patterns. For instance, there's like a counting of like 3 or 4 that repeats. That's a measure. So usually you'll have like in pop music, for instance, you'll have like 4 beats, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 3, 1, 3. That's kind of like the beat, and that's pretty common in pop and rock music. So there's repeating numbers, and then you have repeating verses and repeating choruses, repeating themes, repeating riffs. So music, and definitely the idea of like the song or pop music has this sort of this formula that's very mathematical of repeating themes, repeating patterns. There's also this aspect of music that's very narrative, like a story, right? It builds up. It there's often a introduction. There's sort of a climax often, and then there's sort of like an outro to songs, and it can be very formulaic, though there's infinite variation within that formula. But still, there's a story, the same way that we sort of think of movies as having stories, or mythology as having stories. There's some sort of arc to a lot of music.
Yeah, we're sort of tapping into, I don't know, something that dives into that structure, but then allows you to move through it and reframe it through all these different expressions. But, when you kind of zoom out and look at that big picture, we see, as you said, like the nested frameworks. And that's actually, I think, like a makeup that we see kind of repeated in all different areas, whether it's the structure of the song or the structure of a story. There's something about this general framework, one might call it sort of archetypal, that allows us to express these deeper aspects.
Right. So we can get into that a little bit. The idea that the hero's journey is somewhat archetypal. That's sort of like you can compare music to mythology in some senses. The hero's journey has the call, the exposition or something,
Mm-hmm.
setting out,
Yeah.
and then there's the abyss, and
Sure.
then there's sort of redemption.
Sure.
All these components of a formula
Yeah.
that we find in a lot of the stories we like a lot, a lot of the blockbusters. And yet there's infinite variation within that formula.
Yeah.
And music is similar. It's archetypal. There's
Yeah.
something inherent in the architecture of our being that resonates with a certain formula. And that's what pop music is. It's very formulaic.
Right.
Not all music is like that. There's a lot of music that
It's
really doesn't follow much of a formula, and there's also many different formulas. There's definitely a hip hop formula.
Sure.
There's a metal formula, and any genre is sort of like a formula. There's a sort of a collection of patterns that are similar, and you're finding the same patterns in the same genre of music.
Yeah.
So there's something about that that's, I would say, archetypal.
Yeah.
Embedded into our being,
Yeah.
speaks to the inherent structures of our psychology, the inherent structures of reality.
So how do you think we evolved to find music, to be with it, to have it so embedded in our culture and our society?
Right. It's a weird question because music, no matter how we take it apart, no matter how we try to like scrutinize music, like from a rational perspective, an evolutionary perspective, it still seems like something that's very mysterious and strange. It doesn't really make sense. Its existence is sort of like, well, why 3 to 4 minutes? Why is that like a pop song? Why not longer? Why not shorter?
Yeah.
Why does it pack so much emotion? How can it evoke so much meaning when it's just airwaves being manipulated?
Yeah.
But there's various theories about this, and I think ultimately everything is sort of rooted in materialism, in some sense, scientific reality. I don't really believe in the sort of supernatural idea behind music, that it's some sort of cosmic message from God or something like that, though it's definitely possible. But humans are very in tune with rhythms. There's the theory that humans hunting in groups, the sort of bipedalism, the sounds of feet hitting the ground over and over again, 2 feet hitting the ground, and groups of humans becoming organized by listening to each other run. And so there's a kind of a thing that would be adaptive to be really attuned to things like that. And you could see the other examples of that, maybe of just perceiving that something is running at you. It's important to perceive the speed of that, the frequency of footsteps approaching you, or wings flapping, or if you want to go even further back with like if our squirrel ancestors, the idea of perceiving a spider like running, who knows, like the kind of perception of rhythm is clearly an adaptive,
And a sensitivity to sound.
sensitivity to sound for sure. Humans are very language oriented, and that means we're very, very attuned to the human voice. And in order to communicate a lot of meaning with language, we have to have a deep sensitivity to pitch. When like I'm going like, okay, and I'm rising up here, and like there's emotion with that, or kind of like diving down and very talk like this.
Right.
It's like you're perceiving meaning as I do that.
Yes.
The speed at which I speak, the tone of my voice, the fact that you can identify who I am. You know I'm Arran when you listen to my voice, and I know you're Alyssa.
Yeah.
And there's no mistake. You can't fake that. And there's something that speaks to a deep sensitivity with sounds, and you could imagine, similar to other art, similar to movies, again, that you could distill this sensitivity to sound associated with the human voice and with language into little bundles of meaning that might become music with enough tinkering and innovation.
Sure.
But again, all these theories are just like a big speculation.
Sure.
So we really have no idea what music is or why it has the form that it has.
Well, I think that's what kind of takes me into the mystery of its archetypal form, and sort of gives me that platform to dive into this idea of, you know, what is happening when we listen to music, and how does it help us reach into the archetypal material of our mind and of our spirit. And to me, music kind of accomplishes through sound what kind of like visual art expresses through image, or what words express in poetry or mythology, other stories that kind of capture the heart that are filled with emotion. And music is another one of those expressions, one of those sensory experiences that we have that seem to kind of give us this framework to step into the container that shapes meaning for us. And that is sort of deeply mysterious, deeply archetypal, because it sort of speaks to something intrinsic, something that's kind of unexplainable and yet feels kind of right.
Right, something that we're grasping at from a deep unconscious place.
Yes.
Right, and
Yes.
that's there's a lot of things about our reality, about ourselves, that are taken for granted because they're just there, and music is just there. You wouldn't question music really unless you were becoming a serious intellectual in the 20th century of like, well, what is this thing? I mean, without, I mean,
Right.
before that, you know, if you're thinking in the past, people just experience music. They experience the voice, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah.
And we experience music now as we're growing up, and it's just there.
Yeah.
And rationally trying to decipher what's happening doesn't work, because ultimately it's just not a rational thing.
Yeah.
It's far deeper than that.
Right.
And that's what all this mystery all this mystery is. And you know, that's part of our introduction is psychology, philosophy, mysticism, and mystery. We're kind of tapping into like,
Yes.
what are these weird things about us that are so unconscious, that are so under the surface, that we can't make sense of.
And I think even sort of anecdotally speaking, that most individuals would find it somewhat difficult to truly explain what their experience to music is. Like, what causes somebody to be able to say, this was the album that I fell in love, you know, with my partner to, you know.
Right. So music is very personal in
Yeah.
that way. And people have an identity that they establish with music. You know, not everyone feels as strongly as others do, but usually people have a very personal, nostalgic relationship with music.
Yeah.
That might just be a product of your experience,
Sure.
where you live,
Yeah.
what your family listened to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely part of it. You can't really negate
Yeah.
what you grew up listening to or what you were exposed to. But there's also something going on that speaks to personality type.
Right. There's a point where you realize I'm starting to choose my own music for myself. And it's
right.
like before that, maybe I always listened to like what my older sister did or what my father listened to. But now I'm venturing out and I'm kind of choosing for myself.
Right. Finding your voice.
Finding your voice. Yeah.
And it's a very interesting thing, because like often people find music that's not their own to be sort of blasphemous. I think a common thing that you can hear people say, and often is kind of a stereotype for like older people.
Yeah.
Just be like, this isn't music. Like, what is this crap the kids are listening to? Like, this isn't music. This ain't no Dean Martin or old swivel hips Elvis. Like, what is, you know? And we're used to that kind of stereotype, but it's true that that we take our music very personally.
Yeah.
And we begin to identify with it. And something about it speaks to who we are,
Yeah.
and our relationship with the world. So, in this sense, for me, the kind of music that I have found that I have gravitated towards over time, once I started to choose my own music, as you said,
Yeah.
is usually something that feels pretty powerful and energetic.
Yeah.
There's a lot of positivity to a lot of the music I like not in a like sentimental and kind of over the top way, but feelings of hope,
Sure.
feelings of heroism, I would say, and that translates to power pop music often. It translates to a lot of rock music, alternative rock music that has a lot of energy to it.
Yeah.
Usually that's not ugly too much. I mean, there's a lot of music that, you know, you wouldn't say it's just the only way you could describe it as ugly, but like Nirvana, for example.
Right.
There's something about Nirvana.
Well, it's grunge.
It's grunge, right? There's something about Nirvana that is heavy and powerful, but there's
Right.
also kind of like an ugliness to
Yeah,
it. There's kind of
That's part of it.
a darkness to it,
Yeah,
a
it's dark.
dirtiness to it,
Yeah.
and that doesn't speak to me as much as something that feels a little more clean. Like the Strokes, for example, were a big band for me growing up. There's something about them. They're not just super, super, super clean. Obviously, they're kind of edgy in some way, but there is a little more of a positivity and straight aheadness compared to some of the more dissonant, kind of angry sounding music.
Yeah.
Or like The Cure, for instance, is a band I like, and there's something about it that's like romantic and beautiful and speaks to deep emotions of longing for love and not so much just like angst and nihilism, which tends to turn me off. And I think that speaks to who I am. That's how I feel.
Yeah, so it's an interesting experience then to reflect upon what music you're drawn to and to start to find within that the reflections of your own sort of orientation to the world and your own emotional expressions, or what kind of really feels true to who you are deep, deep down. Because with music, you don't have to prove that to anybody. You don't have to show up in any way or any form. It's yours and it's yours alone, and you get to be in your room listening to it, or it's plugged into your ears. It's something that you can claim for yourself. And you know, maybe you do have to explain a little bit why you might like a band or an artist, but ultimately, you know, it's something that I think just allows us to find a sense of identity and to really anchor ourselves and start to kind of discover then how we want to express parts of ourselves, because the music is kind of showing us a way. You know, for you, it's the being drawn towards that powerful, romantic, kind of straight ahead. And I think to me, those are all kind of qualities that I see within you as an individual as well.
Right. I mean, we talked about like the Big Five personality test.
Yes.
A few episodes ago, but you know, my personality is one. I'm very conscientious. There's a feeling of order that I like. There's a feeling of responsibility. There's sort of this desire for things to work correctly, but there's also this openness in me, and it just reflects this kind of like romanticism, but energy, also lots of power, and it feels kind of like you know, kind of like the warrior of light or something like that is sort of like how I feel about music. It's like that's kind of like the archetype I might like project onto like my music is some like hero who's like for love and glory, like, or something like that. That some people find a little overly sentimental or kind of like silly, and like, you know, I've been made fun of before for that. That's okay.
Yeah, so we're sort of tapping into this idea of, you know, really taking this discerning eye to your musical tastes, and then even as Arran just did, sort of finding this this figure, this kind of like little avatar, and what does that say about you and your strengths and your expressions, and then also thinking what, you know, the type of music you're not drawn to and what turns you off. Because that also certainly speaks to aspects of your own shadow, things that you turn away from.
Yeah.
Maybe parts of yourself that have to do with previous experiences, you know, that feel uncomfortable or something like that. So using music then as this framework to understand yourself a little bit deeper. And certainly for me, I find that the musical taste that I have and what I'm drawn to quite reflects my being, my personality, my psychological orientation. And I'm trying to think of like what my little avatar would be. Something like a mystical, like singing goddess, kind of powerful, yet like, you know, wants to kind of like dance through like the cosmic world of music. Because for me, music's a very like spiritual experience.
Right.
And I always feel like I tap into that place when I listen to the music that really touches me.
Right. I imagine kind of like it's like a sorceress, like on top of a Pegasus, and she like rides around and she like sings, and as she sings, like it like makes like plants grow on the ground, and like people find like their like crops are growing better, and like they're like getting all this abundance from the music, but that like sometimes that something terrible was happening. And like you just like scream and you like destroy things with your voice as well.
Yeah.
So like there's like a lot of power, but also like a lot of like benevolence and sort of feelings of good nature and positivity and beauty.
Yes. Yeah, beauty and power, I think, are a big aspect of what I'm drawn to in music, because like I really like powerful singers. Like ever since I was very young, I grew up listening to like a lot of really great disco female singers like Gloria Gaynor and Donna Summer, who just, God, do incredible things with their voice. Meatloaf is like another artist I listen to a lot. I was a big fan,
Yeah.
and my father was as well. And there's just something about this thundering power of a voice. Linda Ronstadt's another really great example of just, you know, singers who tap into that deep well of musical energy, not through, you know, a guitar, but through their vocal cords, you know, like
Right.
Robert Plant. It's just
Right.
like, oh my God, like what is happening here? And
Yeah.
there's just something that just mesmerizes me
It's
with
very,
that.
very operatic,
Yeah.
almost, but not over the top in a way that's silly. But still, the booming voice of power and the
Yeah.
sincerity of it
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
beauty of it.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, that reflects who you are in a serious way. It's also interesting to kind of talk about our relationships to creating music.
Yeah.
As we said, that we're both musicians. I'm probably a more committed musician than you are. I've spent more time playing music,
Definitely.
but there is sort of a masculine thinker relationship that I have with music that very much involves a lot of technical skill, a lot of
Yeah.
focus on sort of engineering the music,
Yeah.
how to put all the pieces together to create that sort of a coherent structure where all the instruments are doing exactly what they're supposed to do, and
Yeah.
like the actual musical production part of it is very important, like getting the sounds that I want and sort of approaching it as if I'm some sort of scientist almost. And for you, there's less of that sort of masculine thinker and more of the kind of feminine feeling
Yeah.
energy, right?
In fact, like to me, your approach, while I deeply appreciate it and recognize its power, I find that technical approach and that rigidness of the structure or figuring out all those pieces to be like exhausting and a little overwhelming, because for me music flows in a very natural and very intuitive way, and I kind of want to like step into the flow. And I often, like, if I want to write music, I'll feel annoyed that I have to like figure out chords and like work out the structure. It's like, ugh, I would rather just kind of let things be, or like just not have to worry about all of that, you know, setting up the framework and,
Right.
and how is this going to
Right.
happen?
You care about the music itself.
Yeah.
That's how I would phrase it, is you want to inhabit the music. You want to channel it. You want to be a conduit for that sort of magical energy that the music provides.
Yeah.
And you don't have as much interest in the technical aspects or the gear or the theory of it, or how you might master creating the correct beat
Right.
for this song.
Right.
Whereas that's a lot of things that I'm really interested in.
Yeah.
And like I play all the instruments really well. I
Yeah.
play guitar and bass and drums, and
Yeah.
I write a lot of songs. I know how to like construct the song from beginning to end, and I have that all fleshed out really well, and a lot of different genres. I can like kind of understand how they work and what makes a song a rock song, and what makes a song a reggae song, and what makes a
Right.
song a hip hop song. Like I
Yeah.
can tell you what those things are technically. And those things don't really interest you.
No. But I would love to like, you know, sing different types of songs, but it's more like, you know, drop me in, you know, like the practice room and like have the band sort of figuring all of that out. And then like, yeah, I can jump into what's being created. Cause that to me is like really fun. Like if I'm gonna jam with my friends, I'd really rather not be playing guitar or bass. Like I can, but I'm not that good. And
Yeah.
I would just rather flow and jam through my voice, and it's such a different experience, I guess, for a singer, because you haven't necessarily built as much like technical skill. It's not to say like singers don't practice and, you know, strengthen their voice and all those things, but it's just it's a very different experience for me, and I sort of just desire to come into relation with the music and kind of move through the emotion and the connection and explore kind of what I sense from the music, which I think sometimes is interesting. Like when we write music together, it's like, I kind of like that you're like playing guitar and then I find like melody that I sense sort of in that structure.
Right. When we've collaborated, it's sort of the metaphor I sort of use is like, you're the seed, like you have the seed, but like I'm the person who like builds the greenhouse and like has to like take all the soil, like put it in the car and like drive it to the greenhouse and like unload it and like dig all the holes and then like plant the seed and have to like water it for like months to get it to grow. But like without the seed, I don't have anything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of our different approaches to music, and also honestly our different approaches to a lot of the creative things we do.
It's true.
You might even say this podcast, in some sense, I'm handling a lot of the technical aspects of the podcast, and you are showing up, bringing your energy, and handling some of these social aspects of the podcast. And those energies can be complementary, for sure.
Certainly.
But it's interesting how the music can reflect our personalities in that way. And if you look around at the people you know, I'm sure you can see this, is that people are interested in certain kinds of music. And if they've really invested time in finding their voice with the music they listen to, not necessarily as musicians, but just really seeking out the music they feel they like, you'll find that it probably reflects their personality in some way. It speaks to some aspect of their being, to their structure, their experiences in life. Not always. But if it doesn't, that probably means that someone hasn't really actually spent much time trying to discover their voice. Yeah. Okay, so what we're going to do now is play some songs. Yeah. Not all the way through, little snippets, but we're going to kind of use this as a way to demonstrate what we're talking about, is different forms of music, how they make us feel. And how that reflects our personalities, perhaps, and other forms of music that we may have some aversion to, and exploring why there may be some aversion. And this, just to be clear to any audience members, this doesn't mean that we are passing real moral judgment on what we're going to play. We're not saying this music is bad and this music is good. We're trying to explore, just on a personal level, what music activates us and what doesn't, and just provide some examples. So this might be a little wacky, but we will give it a shot. So
let's do it.
So first is My Sweet Lord by George Harrison. And we're not going to play the whole thing, but you can kind of discuss what is it about this song that you like, Alyssa. You like this song a lot.
Already feel
I do
like,
too, but you...
This like welling in my chest in a really like good way. I love George Harrison. This is like such deeply authentic and spiritual music to me. So to me, like his voice and his heart and his spirit speaks so much through his music. And this song in particular, probably one of his most well-known songs, explores this idea of his devotion to, to God, and the song is sort of has all these beautiful mantras that are woven through it. This particular recording is done with just that big, beautiful sound to it.
Right, it's the wall of sound. It's like a lot of thickness to the sound. It's very deep. Yeah. It's also very kind of bright.
Yeah.
For me, this music like really evokes this image of light to me, and that's not only with just the positivity and the feeling of like benevolence and beauty, but there also is the spirituality to it. Like it feels like it's really tapping into what it means to be human and live a good, devoted life where you're really trying to be a good person and do what's right. And it's just interesting how the music evokes that very, very strongly. Almost like you're in a church, right?
Yes.
It's like you're just kind of, I mean, they're saying hallelujah. That's obvious. But even without that, there is sort of this image of people a congregation clapping their hands together and kind of
yes.
praising the Lord together. There's
Yeah, and this song being recorded with Phil Spector, that wall of sound that we're talking about, gives it that sense of, because it's like probably there's like 2 drum kits that it was recorded with,
right.
like probably like 5 guitarists, you know, they have all of these backing tracks with the vocals, and it's just creating an atmosphere that's lifting you up, and you can kind of just be held in it and sort of moved through this beautiful, like I kind of feel like I'm soaring through the air when I listen to this song.
Open skies.
Yeah,
it's
open
like
skies.
The sun is out. The call and response also has this sort of this ritual, sacred congregation that's happening.
Yeah, he's
people
tapping
coming
into
together.
like the kirtan aspect because you know George Harrison was a huge yogi, so that's part of the ritualistic singing of yogic music. So
and I think it's safe to say George Harrison really found his voice.
Yes,
and that's what this whole album was about, really.
Yeah,
and we could go on and on about the history of this album, but
yes,
him finding himself and finally being like, this is my music, and you can tell it's like this is who he is. It's like more so than like John Lennon, who like is very edgy, very kind of like again sort of like nihilistic, I would say, and kind of like tapping in sort of like the weirdness and kind of like the bullshit of like life. But like then you have like George, who's just like he's just celebrating basically and just
beauty
feeling
and grace and just a deeply spiritual, deeply religious man, and that comes through in his music.
All right, let's move on.
Okay.
So this is Just Like Heaven by The Cure.
Okay.
It's a song I like. Pretty popular song, should be familiar. But again, the rhythm of the song, very driving.
Yeah.
More driving than the last song.
Yes.
For sure. It's like
already
higher
has
tempo.
you sort of like moving in a much different way.
Right. So there's just a lot of energy to this, and it's not necessarily like dancing energy as much as kind of just like you just go with it. Like driving music, like you might be in your car and cruising down the highway. There's feelings of speed and movement. But with The Cure, there's also like there's so much romanticism. Again, there's beauty, there's emotion.
Yeah.
And for me, tying those together is usually in the music I like. Feelings of passion, deep passion for life, and being kind of youthfully active and athletic and energetic. And again, heroism is like I think the best word I can use to describe it. Just feels courageous. And
yeah, it's kind of odd because I do feel this sense of like youthfulness to this song. And certainly like I did not grow up listening to The Cure, and I'm much older, or I'm not old enough to have grown up with it, you know, like when it was released, but they're capturing something to me that feels like the beauty of like a teenage summers, you know, of falling in love and summer nights, you know, in high school and things like that.
Right. And again, that's very much how I feel. Youthful energy, lots of love, lots of romance, longing, lots of longing, but like feelings of positivity, lust for life kind of thing. So, all right, let's move on. All right, another really popular song, Don't Worry Baby by the Beach Boys.
Yes, I picked this song. I love the Beach Boys. Oh my God. Just this chorus of voices in perfect harmony together is so powerful to me, especially when you realize like how difficult it is to have like 4 or 5 part harmonies. Like, oh my God, it's just intense that all of these, they were also talented.
Right. And that's an undeniable aspect of the music. Is like you really, if you can perceive what's actually being created here and the work that goes into it, it definitely makes you appreciate it more. And so there's this whole story behind the music that is very important.
Yes.
But again, a lot of deep layers here, so many different things going on at once, and there's so much beauty. Yeah,
a lot of beauty.
And the Beach Boys, they got a little psychedelic at some points,
They did.
but still lots of beautiful journeying, you know, like on the beach.
A feeling
obviously.
of movement a lot with their songs. I always like to say that my earliest childhood music memory was me dancing on the couch with these big headphones on, listening to the Beach Boys. I was probably like 3 or 4. And I think that if you can capture the heart of a child, that there's just something very pure that's going on.
Yep.
And that's what happened for
Purity.
me.
Yeah,
Purity.
Beach Boys definitely,
Yeah.
especially early stuff, like
Very,
a lot
yeah.
of purity. I mean, even the lyrics,
Yes.
just like, can't wait, baby, till we're married. So maybe we can like spend the night together. Like maybe we'll find out. Like and there's something about that that's in the music of
Yeah.
like this innocence
Yeah,
and
innocence.
Joy.
Yeah.
Okay. Next. So this is Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush.
Yeah, we had to include a Kate Bush song.
Obviously. No list is complete without Kate Bush. But you chose this.
Yes. I wanted to include Kate Bush because there is something so incredibly extraterrestrial about her music and her voice and her soul as a musician. It's so compelling and strange and powerful and creative without like, I will admit that kind of some of my aversions with music come from like kind of the artistic music, like things are just very artsy, I guess I should say,
Weird in that way. You mean kind of like disjointed or doing something that's kind of like obtuse.
Yeah. And but Kate Bush kind of steps in and wears all of these many hats, these different characters, this different way of singing, tapping into all these strange, complicated, beautiful ways of using her voice, and it's still her, and it still keeps me with her, and that can be difficult with me.
Right. So she's very operatic.
Yes, very operatic.
And she's also very much her own person, very, very authentic. So there's like a deep authenticity and like a mystery to her.
Yeah.
Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, where did this come from? And like in this recording, she's like 17, 18, something like that.
Incredibly young.
So really weird individual, but just the kind of again operatic. There's like it's performative. It's almost like it's dramatic. Like it should be on stage. Lots of instruments that are kind of evoking that not quite over the topness, but big, expansive.
Yeah,
and
it's dramatic.
Dramatic. Okay. Move on. Okay, this is Call on Me by Eric Prides. So we're going to try to kind of get into music perhaps that causes a little bit of like an aversion.
Sure.
So I like this because it's got this deep energy that just, makes you want to like kind of like shake your hips and just kind of like, that's the point of the music, right? But you feel an aversion to this music. What would you say? How would you even describe it?
Just repetitive and kind of, lacking a sense of capturing like spirit. I think this is gonna get into a lot of like my psychology, but like it feels artificial. It's
You think this is repetitive?
I just feel like I'm being knocked over the head with something just over and
Almost
over
like
again.
Each beat is like a club hitting
It's like
you.
clubbing. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like, I get how you can like step into this and like, like moving your shoulders, dancing, jumping up and down. But like, I lack like the meaning and the beauty. Maybe if I was like super drunk, I would just be like, like this is great. But even then,
it's something. I mean, the music we've chosen so far is very. It's very like ritualistic and like religious almost. There's like this feeling of deep beauty and devotion to it. And when you get into this realm of music, I sort of feel like you're kind of getting away from like the ritual and like this sacredness, and you're kind of getting towards more of like, it's like almost like it's an exercise, like or an athletic event, or it's something that's sort of distilling a
like
very
here's the formula,
narrow emotion and just like pushing that button over and over again. But I feel like this is you don't put this on to like perform a ritual of like listening to music as much as you put this on because you want to dance. And that's interesting. Okay, we're gonna move on. So this is Nickelback. And you're laughing because you like it?
No, I'm laughing.
Because it's bad. Because it creates a lot of aversion. But the aversion to you is that you find it hysterical almost.
I am laughing a lot.
Nickelback. You could say it's like, oh, he's just trying to do the same thing that like the Beach Boys are trying to do, just like beautiful sounds and like powerful voice.
Yeah.
But there's again an inauthenticity
Right.
to the voice.
I think it's funny because I think you could even like look at the lyrics that they've chosen. Because I think that's always supposed to be like really meaningful. Look at this thing I did, like whatever. But there's just something that doesn't quite land.
Yeah.
And it's not even like, you know, the singer is bad, you know, and the music's just terrible, but there's just some elements coming together here that don't really speak to some sort of deep inherent truth, at least
right.
for me.
So again, we don't want to insult anyone who might be listening, but if you're really into music like this, to me, it speaks a lack of depth, and because the music I don't think is very deep, and there's not a real story there.
Right. Yeah.
It's to me, it's like a book. Like it's like, oh, there's this book. It must have a story, and you open it up and it's empty. It's like all the pages are blank.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it feels to me. There's just. It seems unlikely that you've really found your own voice.
Yeah.
If you're listening to a lot of Nickelback.
Yeah.
To me, but.
Yeah.
You know, preference. It's all preference. Okay, so we're gonna move on to let's see.
Oh God. Just like really intense metal music. I don't.
Listen to the voice. It's really impressive, though, right? Sorry.
Okay, this metal really does sort of throw one for a loop, because especially when I approach it trying to be objective, like as a musician, I'm like, I cannot believe how insane it must be to play music like this.
Yep.
To scream like that, to play the drums that fast,
right.
to shred on the guitar like a monster. But it's really I don't know what's going on this song right now.
There is something they're distilling something real. There's always a kernel of truth within every genre of music, and they're distilling it to the extreme. But there's like a hyper masculinity here,
right?
That it's actually going beyond being human to being sort of like an orc, or like whatever for like Lord of the Rings, like whatever the orc is. That's like a real archetype, right?
Sure.
Like, what are we tapping into? It's like you're tapping into kind of like the monstrous version of humanity.
Right.
Just like the elf is sort of like the more elegant, higher level human. The orc is like something like lower and like impure and evil. And this is like tapping into that archetype musically, almost.
Right.
And there's something very interesting about that.
Yeah. I think one way you've explained it before also is it's like an athletic event. Right.
That's definitely, I mean, that's another discussion, because talking about people playing music very technically in a way where they're not really into music as much as they're into sort of skill.
Yeah.
Or they're into athleticism.
Sure.
For instance, like playing drums is really fun.
Yeah.
But you might get lost in trying to have fun playing drums and forget about the music itself, which is like a stereotype for drummers and bands. But that's why music is such a weird thing. There's so many components to it.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Let's see. I don't even know what you call this, but this is like reggaeton or...
It's definitely...
You just don't even know what to say. You're just speechless.
Speechless. No, it's interesting. I think like this music, as someone who also really loves to dance and sometimes feels like an aversion to music comes from the fact that like my body doesn't know how to move to it. This like I can already kind of sort of feel like, yeah, my shoulders sort of like moving with the beats. Like it kind of like brings up this fun, dynamic, light, fiery kind of energy to it. I think there's probably like versions or of this genre that I would enjoy more, because like there's kind of like weird. Is that like Little John? I don't know. He sounds like he's like doing the.
He's influenced by Little John for sure. Culo means ass in Spanish. They're just yelling ass over
They're
and over
just
again.
yelling ass over and over again.
The Latin beats, there's sort of like a syncopation to them that makes it not so straightforward.
Yeah.
And that creates kind of a, I don't want to say like disjointedness, but it kind of creates this rocking motion.
Yeah.
Not like rock and roll, but like of like you're going one way and then you stop and then you go again and you kind of like go that way for a while and then you stop and then you take another turn. And that creates this energy that is kind of sexy.
It's
like,
sexy. Yeah.
There's a lot of energy to it.
A lot of movement, sort of like in the hips as well. You can feel it sort of like moving that way.
But it's interesting because it's not energy like a power pop song.
Right.
It's not energy like the metal song. It's a different energy.
Yeah.
And even though it's a slower tempo, it's still kind of getting this sort of shaking energy to it, which is really kind of hard to articulate.
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we'll do one more. Let's see. This is New Noise by Refused. This has got like a weird, like these guys are like European or something, or there's kind of this feeling to like the dance music kind of going on, but there's also like just like weird like.
Oh my god.
Like he's like screaming. And he's speaking English, but there's something about this, like it's not quite punk,
Right.
and it's not quite screamo. There's something going on here that's very unique and interesting, but it kind of reminds me almost like Rammstein.
Right.
Just like that other place, like Eastern Europe, like who knows what's going on over there.
Yes, a whole blending of really strange things. It's kind of like a chimera. It's like the head of a dog and the tail of a snake and I wouldn't want to sit and listen to it. That's how I feel.
Anyways, we're running out of time. So the idea is that music reflects personality type. It reflects experience.
Yeah.
Music is very personal, but it's when you listen to music, you are inhabiting some sort of realm of feeling, realm of self-expression.
Yeah.
And so it's natural that you would want to inhabit a feeling or expression that resonates with who you are.
Yeah.
And we can see this in what we listen to and see it in what we don't listen to. And this can help you unpack your own personality, kind of figure out who you are based on the music you listen to. Do you have a question for us? Do you have a dream you'd like us to analyze? Is there a topic you'd like us to cover?
We want to hear from you. Contact us through a submission form, which can be found on our Instagram page at Golden Shadow Podcast. Or if you're listening on YouTube, you can find the link in the description down below.
Thanks for listening.
See you later.
If you find this podcast useful, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Golden Shadow Podcast. Thank you.